Thank you so much. And I do that's why I think it's helpful if it's possible for any of you to make a day retreat in your home. Make an afternoon. Start with an afternoon where you're basically, spending a little time at the Lam Rim, reading some prayers that you want to get to, but you haven't been. Maybe you're just looking at one chapter of a book and you spend a week with that chapter, just a little bit really, but you read something and then you reflect back deeper, kind of going in, and you just see how it goes. I think it's really worthwhile because you get a slice of your mind. It's not all easy and it's not all pleasant, but it's part of, we need to kind of get a look at, that's what really retreats is, becoming friends with yourself, becoming friends with your mind. So thank you so much, Tutu and Norberling. I want to thank both Marys for hosting. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. And welcome, Mike. Lovely to see you. Anyway, it's great to see all of you. Mike's from my area, the Philly area, Philadelphia. So we're going to talk about the Book of Joy today. These five, I think it's 5 sessions, Tuesdays. And what I'm going to do is take you through the 8 pillars of joy. And this is nice. It's just a nice little addition to your life, to your day. And you can also roll it through some Lam Rim meditations. But I just want to explain some things that will can brighten up your life. And I think really lend joy to what you're doing, to lend joy to your life. So we try our best like that. So the first thing we want to do is let's just take a moment to consider our motivation. And if you'd like, wherever you're sitting, okay, just close your eyes for a moment. Notice your breath. Just a very basic inhalation, exhalation. And if you'd like, begin to deepen your breath. And imagine as you exhale, releasing tension, all of your agendas and lists, all the activity, just let it go right now. Bringing yourself more present into our space. Begin to notice your thoughts. What's floating around in your mind right now? But without getting overly attached to any particular thought, just observe. And being gentle with yourself. Just see all the thoughts as the same, as bubbles, rising from the depth of your mind. Just let them float off. Just think about, probably there's a wish deep inside of you to be happy, to be really happy. Everybody wants to be happy. So not just us, but everybody wants that. So just imagine if you could reach a place by a little bit reorienting all those thoughts in your mind in a more positive way. And that you could reach a place where you have every piece of information, all the knowledge of how to best lead any being you meet to that happiness. Think about that place. And take a moment to set a motivation for this time together, as well as all the activities of the rest of your day from this place. So really, for the benefit of all living beings, for all of them to be ultimately happy, let's get together and talk about the 8 pillars of joy. So please relax and slowly open your eyes. Let's talk about number 1, perspective. Perspective. And I will make time for questions at the end. 4 of the pillars of joy are qualities of the mind. 4 of them are qualities of the heart. That's how they've been divided up. But let me discuss where this is coming from. Some of you may have read the book of Joy. And what it is are it's interviews that were conducted a few years ago with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I think a lot of it was conducted in Dharamsala, where His Holiness lives. Archbishop Desmond Tutu came to visit. They're old friends. And the interviewer, I forget his name right now, but was discussed with them. These are 2 people that have gone through, as you know, extreme difficulties in their lives, with His Holiness losing his country to the communist Chinese, having to stand by while over 1 million of his country people were slaughtered. It's still going on. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu living through apartheid in the Republic of South Africa and the changes of that. So how did they maintain a joyful demeanor? So it's very inspiring to think about. We have a little bit in our little limited lives, oh, woe is me, you know, the pandemic, and the pandemic is very, very challenging. There's no question. And so many people have died, so many families suffering from great loss and people sick. And it's horrible. There's no question. But for a lot of us right now that can show up with good internet and Zoom things, and you're connected to a center, and we have a passport from a country that we can stay forever. And, you know, there's certain things that you don't know what it's like to be a refugee, things like that, and to be a guest in another country that could change their policies at any day. And so what happens is we get into these little problems with us, you know, like I had some interesting things in retreat of the kitchen sink dripping, something with the toilet and something else with the heater. So fortunately, nothing insurmountable, but sometimes you get really caught up in it. you know, and then all this mental anxiety comes. And certainly health issues are a big thing for mental anxiety. But when you think about the two of them, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and what they were able to overcome and continue to keep a peaceful, joyful mind. Think about it. It really diminishes a lot of our problems. So perspective is number one, quality of the mind. And just think about what perspective, how it can lend to your overall joy experience in life. Okay, a healthy perspective is really the foundation of joy. Okay, it's really a foundation of joy and happiness. Let's think about this. Because the way we see the world is the way we experience the world. Changing the way we see the world, in turn, changes the way we feel, changes the way we act. Okay, and that, as a result, changes the world because we're part of the world, right? So, and then, you know, from the Buddha was saying, with our mind, we create our own world. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche is always teaching on this. I just watched a short video of him. And again, everything comes from the mind. This is Rinpoche's mantra sometimes. Everything comes from the mind. So you blame the pandemic. And, you know, I've heard my neighbors blaming the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for its very poor vaccine rollout. And you can blame your neighbor for this, and you can blame that presidential candidate and all the people that protested at the Capitol. And meaning it's everybody else's problem and fault that I'm not feeling great today, or I'm not able to do that, or able to travel, or able to see my friends. Okay? And this teaching I just watched with Rinpoche, he just said it's karma. He's like, subdue your mind, take care of your mind. It's karma that this is happening. So if we don't want to focus on that, if we don't, and it's interesting, some of the books I was reading in retreat, I always like this thing they come back to is, whether you believe in karma or not, it's unfolding. It's unfolding. So you don't have to believe in karma. This relationship, this dynamic, it means action. The word means action. And it's basically a relationship of cause and effect. Cause and effect. So when I think something, it has a result. When I say something, it has a result. When I act, it has a result. Comes from the mind. Okay. If I want to negate that and say, no, I don't believe that, I think it's coming from that guy over there that I don't like, see how it works for you. Okay, you fix that guy, great. You know, you have a problem with your boss. I've seen this happen to people all the time. They complain about the boss. It's months about the boss, a year about the boss. It's him, they hate him, it's whatever, it's her. They're doing it to me. I hate my job because of my boss. And then the boss changes jobs. They get transferred and you're all excited, right? And then somebody else is hired and somehow you have the same problem with them. Or somebody's going to show up with the same dynamic. So you have to eventually, after a while, start thinking, could it be my mind? Okay, that's when we really start practicing. Could it be my mind? Okay. So His Holiness says, to go on a little bit, says, for every event in life, there are many different angles. When you look at the same event from a wider perspective, okay, your sense of worry and anxiety reduces and you have greater joy. I could be upset about the leaking sink and the this and the that, and you know, and then I think His Holiness lost his country, right? People with family in the hospital dying of COVID. That's not my situation, right? And even if you have a health issue, the chances are there's somebody that has it worse than you. It's always somebody that has it worse than you. So that perspective really, instead of our narrow focus, we tend to keep it very focused in this little narrow thing of me, myself, and I. As soon as we step out of that, and I think about my neighbor broke her ankle a couple of weeks ago, right? And she broke the ankle that she uses, the right ankle, to drive. Her work as a physical therapist, driving to people's homes. She can't drive. She can't go to work. She's sitting there laid up, 3 little girls at home, homeschooled. And I mean, the online school, you know, it's been, you know, really difficult for her and her husband, but they're great, you know. But when I think of my situation, I'm like, I can walk. I don't, you know. So as soon as you step out of it, perspective, well, when I finished retreat, I offered to her and said, let me know if you need anything. Do you need me to drive you someplace? Do you need me to get food? Let me know. More joy, happier. Okay. So our perspective toward life is our final and ultimate freedom. Our perspective literally has the power to keep us alive or to cause our death, right? So from Thupten Jinpa, this is also from his self-compassion and his compassion courses. Thupten Jinpa is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's interpreter from when His Holiness is on the road generally. He's the translator. He's a wonderful guy. He's a professor at McGill University in Canada. He explains, well, changing our emotions is quite hard. Changing our perspective is actually a lot easier. Okay, it's part of our mind. Okay, the part of our mind that we have influence over. The way you see the world, the meaning you give to what you witness, changes the way you feel. Okay, and it's really, in a sense, the first step of like a spiritual neural journey, he says, that results in more and more equanimity of our default state, like that your default state becomes increasingly more joyful. Can you imagine? So one of the things when we started, and I said, watch the bubbles of your thoughts. Watch the bubbles of the thoughts, but see them on an equal level and let them go. What happens is we'll have a really negative thought about ourselves or someone else. And then that tends to move out all the other thoughts in your mind. And you obsess about it. And you replay it and ruminate over and over. And then your external world, you look around and you start seeing people reflected back to you from that negative mind, that state. You've all had that happen. We all have that going on at times. So about shifting the emphasis of putting too much emphasis on this particular thought. I was doing this in retreat because retreat is hard, to be alone with your mind day after day, showing up for certain meditations, the prayers and practices. And there were times my mind was sinking and kind of feeling depressed like that, and a little bit like low, and, you know, and then that got going. And I noticed if I ruminated through that, it just made it worse. And then I thought, wait a minute, why aren't I focusing? And I was more focused on, I maybe laid up, piled a little bit too much on my plate as usual. But I think there were certain things I wanted to also get done in retreat that I didn't do. I just didn't have time. So what happens is I started focusing on what I wasn't doing as opposed to what I was doing. And I had to stop and reorient and say, wait a minute, I'm doing all this other stuff. That, you know, it's not really about the doing necessarily, but I am moving through some things. And so I just started refocusing. Every time the negative thought came up, I went, okay, I see you, let that go. And this is great what I'm doing. So we do have to spend the effort to do that, to really, to show up. And there are people that stay with the sinking mind. They hang out there for way too long, and that becomes a habit. Again, meditation is you looking at the habits of your mind, becoming friends with your mind. So you're enjoying and liking certain aspects of your mind, the healthy, positive ones, and focusing more on those. And looking at the other ones with gentleness and care and compassion. So perspective, again, is nothing less, in a sense, the skull key that opens all the locks that imprison our happiness, okay? And as far as what's the perspective shift that has such power, what's the healthy perspective that the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu bring to life that allows them to greet life with so much joy in the face of so much sorrow that they've experienced. So the Dalai Lama, he uses terms, the wider perspective, larger perspective. It involves stepping back sometimes within your mind. Look at the bigger picture. Again, to move beyond our limited self-awareness and our limited self-interest, our self-absorption. So the stepping, like, you get involved and there's like a hysterical moment, and we're not around a lot of people right now, but there's certain habits. There's actually one of my friend's daughters is about to enter, I think next year or later this year, she enters high school. And she got into a really good high school that she wanted. There was a lot of anxiety around getting in. She got in, and now I just got a message that the daughter wants to talk to me about how to deal. So what happens is when you're around a lot of neurotic teenage girls, and I'm not laying a trip on them, I'm just saying where they're all worried, and you know how we tend to dress and try to mirror each other. And teenage girls are always doing that. They always wear the same thing and their hair is the same, and it's normal. It's normal like that. So so instead of getting into when, like, for instance, they see a puppy dog and they all squeal, instead of buying into that, it's just an influence, a habit, you can kind of have a more balanced perspective. So I'm using the squealing at a puppy dog as just one of these mundane habits. But what if, they enter, and I'm going to talk to her about this, about instead of getting caught up in all those hysterias of this boyfriend and that girlfriend, and she said this and he said that, and how we're so manipulated at that age, but it carries on into adulthood. And you tend to respond to things bumping up against the people around you or just the influences around you. So even if you go to the supermarket, you might have a certain reactive response based on somebody's having a bad day and they lash out or they say the wrong thing. And then so instead I can somebody lashed out, you step back, right? And you kind of look and you think, maybe they're having a hard time. Instead of, I don't like them in my space. And we see a lot of people responding that way. I don't like them in my space. And, we just had 4 years of bullying and being blamed and like that from a leadership position in our country. So it has an influence. So again, the perspective, stepping back, there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger picture. I don't like my boss. It's just one person in my scene. What does the boss struggle with? What is the boss really like? Do you know them that well? Do you know everything that motivates them, this difficult person? Like that. So that really is helpful, gaining that perspective and a little bit lessening our self-absorption. It's always all about me, right? And that's so boring, so tiring, doesn't make us happy. So every situation we confront in life comes from this convergence of many contributing factors, okay? And the Dalai Lama explains that we must look at any given situation or problem from the front, from the back, from the sides, top, bottom, okay? He's like at least 6 angles, okay? It allows us to take a more complete and holistic view of reality. And if we do, the tendency is your responses are going to be more constructive. So when you focus on a small detail, it can lend to fear, anxiety, hatred, depression. So, and Jinpa even goes on with, take something bad that happened in the past in your life and think about all the good that came out of it. Think about all the good that came out of it. There's definitely situations in our life, something you can reflect on. So with a wider perspective, we can see our situation and all those involved in a larger context and from a more neutral position. I'm not so hysterical anymore. I'm from a neutral position to see You know, and I remember one of my friend's daughters, she's a longtime Dharma practitioner who's in big love. And her daughter, when I lived in California, I got to know her daughter pretty well. And we're actually friends now. And her daughter, I think, is in her 30s. But when she was a teenager, her daughter had a really great seed in her of goodness. And I could see at our family camp and different things with other kids, when there was some little hysterical moment or somebody fell in the poison oak and somebody cut themselves or somebody was upset about this or they weren't picked for that, or her daughter had a way of staying neutral. Like she would assess. I could see her looking at it, but she didn't get into the whole group vibe of the hysteria. And I was always impressed with that, of how and I remember talking to her mom once and her mother said, yeah, she's really great that way, where she sees people bullying kids in school and then she doesn't participate. And then she ends up trying to befriend the kid that got bullied. Like she has this perspective on it. So great imprint to have like that. So it is helpful to look at some of the negative things that have happened to you. There can be a silver lining. There can be a silver lining in there if we're willing to step in there and look at it. So with a wider perspective, again, by seeing these many conditions and circumstances that have led to this event, we can recognize that our limited perspective is not the truth. Okay. Our limited perspective is not the entire picture. Okay. And His Holiness goes on to say we can also see the long view and have a clear understanding of how our actions, our problems exist in the larger frame of our life. This allows us to see that even though our situation may seem challenging now, from the vantage point of a month or a year ago or a decade, these challenges will be very manageable. You know, think about when you had some really arduous thing you had to deal with, and think about now how it is, how you look back on that time. Like that, things are much more manageable. So people who more frequently also, they've done some studies, people who more frequently say I, me, mine a lot, okay, scientifically, apparently, they have a higher risk of having a heart attack, had a higher risk of their heart attack being fatal. Amazing, right? You know, one researcher found that this so-called self-involvement was a better predictor of death than smoking, than a better predictor of death than high cholesterol levels or high blood pressure. Can you imagine? Just this perspective of our mind, to lessen our self-absorption, to consider others. That. And it also said that, again, and this, I think most of you know this, but again, also people that use a lot of the first person singular words, again, I and me, are more likely to be depressed than people who use more of a we and us when it's appropriate. So how much self-regarding, self-absorption keeps us from joy, like that. And I know, you know, when I was just mentioning, by seeing all these conditions and circumstances, and some of you, I'm not sure, I might have mentioned this before, I'm not sure if it was with Santa Fe, Tutu Norberling or another center, but there was a film that came out some years ago, a commercial film. I can't remember the name, but it was, I want to say, was Dennis Quaid in it? There were a bunch of different actors, but what they did is was an assassination in like Mexico City or something of a president or something. But what happened is the film showed you every different angle. Like you first thought, well, this is the person who killed him, and this person was bad. And then you saw another angle of that person's life and how they got there. And then you see another angle from somebody else, that like a bomb went off, I think. And you see all the different people it affected, but you initially have a certain view. And then each perspective layers up onto it. So you suddenly, because you think at first you had the whole story, but you didn't. And from the initial limited story you got, you interpreted it and had a certain view and opinion and judgment. And a lot of us, for the States, we have incredible judgments and opinions constantly like that. So then you have to keep poking to say, well, like His Holiness said, 6 different views. Well, wait a minute. What's her perspective? Well, how does the boss feel coming into work every day and nobody likes him or her? What's that like? Right? So there's just so many different angles that we can look at. So let me just ask if there's any questions right now. And thank you. Mary put the link in the chat. You can see the link for the Book of Joy if you're interested in getting a copy of that. Let me just see if there's any questions. I know sometimes I didn't leave enough time, so I thought I'll make a little bit more time. Okay. Let me know if you do have any questions. Number 2 pillar, humility. What do you think of humility? It's a great one, okay? The word humility actually comes from the Latin word for earth or soil, and it's actually the same root for humor, like that. So, so this word from earth or soil, humility, when you think about it, literally brings us back to earth. Okay, sometimes with a thud, right? But humility literally brings us back to earth. And we know some people who are very humble. And I personally find it very attractive. Like, I want to be near them. I'm curious, you know, I've never felt like I'm a very humble person. So it intrigues me. You know, I've really looked at my mind of how to lend some more humility to my situation. You know, and that can actually be helpful when something negative happens to you. When something negative happens to you, it's humbling. It's humbling. And it does make you feel more of the suffering on the planet too. You know, when we're on top of the world and everything's going well, it's not a lot of regard sometimes for others. And you know, there can be an arrogance that comes from it. You know, this is great. I got, you know, I've heard of people, what's the thing, people saying, you know, posting they got their vaccine, you know, and it's really upsetting some other people. It's like, you have to think about it, you know, so, you know, and you see the arrogance. I've heard some people in my neighborhood talking about, you know, and you see some people are like, yeah, you know, so true arrogance really comes from insecurity, needing to feel that we are bigger than others. It comes from a nagging fear that we are smaller. So, and there's a Tibetan saying that wisdom's like rainwater, okay? Both gather, wisdom and rainwater, they gather in low places. So, and you know, often they'll say with Tibetan lamas and the Tibetan system is not to announce your realizations. It's not their style at all. And usually they'll say that those, you know, this expression, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. So when we think about that of, you know, and this is not about being depressed and bringing yourself down. It's just, I really like, somehow it brings in for me shared humanity, that with the pandemic, we're all in the same boat right now. On one level, okay? On another level, obviously, poor people are not in the same boat that we're in. There's some people really struggling, some people without food and care and whatever. It's really, really a struggle. But as far as the pandemic and the limits of travel and the country and the world and what's happening, we're all experiencing this right now. So you realize, like, it's not just me unable to see my family or my grandchild or my grandmother or my whomever. it's not only me not able to go to a restaurant and eat inside a restaurant without any fear of getting anything, or it's not only me having to come back and, wipe everything down or sanitize my hands. Everybody's having to do that. Everybody's going through that. So that brings that humility in there. So I'm not, why am I any better than anybody else? So again, coming from it, and it also comes from, so we've got humility, humor, and humanity. They all come from the same root. They all come from the same root, about this soil, the earth, like that. So growth begins in these low places. So just think about that. So similarly, if you remain humble, there's a possibility you're going to keep learning. Humble people I know, they have this sense that they can learn from everybody. It's always an opportunity to learn from everybody, like that. So it can be really helpful that each thing can turn, change something about another perspective, adding on to the perspective is, oh, there's their view. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. There's this view that, I remember during the divisiveness of the election, and I had, family members or different friends that were really trashing the side they didn't follow, that they didn't support. But I like to read other perspectives, because there were times it really taught me of, like, I wanted to know what somebody was thinking about who followed this particular person. I was like, and I could see that, some of it made sense. Some of it made sense to me, like that, based on where they were coming from, having a bigger perspective again in seeing what kind of background did they come from? What's their living situation like? They've had a really difficult living situation. They've been laid off for a long time. That industry in their area is changing, and they're lessening it. So what are they going to do? That's all they've ever known in their family for generations, is that kind of work. How would you feel? You can sit here behind your computer and go, oh, I'm not involved and it doesn't matter. But if that's your family and that's your whole culture, how would you feel like that? So it's a major hurdle to start to think about others' perspectives and what they're doing. And for us to find in the shared humanity that's related to all these words, is to find our way to healthy relationship with these beings, especially the ones we feel are different than us, especially the ones that have different perspective from us. So let me talk also a little bit more with joy in general. To build joy into our lives, to start to grow more joy, let's think about the different types of joy. What's joy associated with? Because we just have this blatant joy, and happiness. But think about, first of all, we get joy from pleasure of the five senses, amusement, whether it's a chuckle or a big belly laugh, right? We get joy from contentment, which is a calmer kind of satisfaction. And I find that deep inner contentment is really a source of ultimate happiness for us. That's the beginning of, when you really feel in sync. Like, I guess for me, noting now just the first day or so out of retreat, and I've managed to seem to come out of this retreat better than usually other retreats. It's just, I end up piling up everything on the first day and I'm really miserable. And so I'm just kind of gently coming out, taking it slowly. And just noticing how, because I'm starting to expand the time of certain practices that I've wanted to do, that I wasn't doing in the beginning of the COVID time. So there's a deeper contentment now that's coming because of that, because I am orienting more of how I feel I should be living, rather than wasting time and kind of just letting the days pass and being like, when's this going to change? We have joy also from excitement to a new experience in our life, or excitement from a challenge can lend to joy. We also have the joy of relief. The joy of relief. Like, I'm happy for the people that have gotten the vaccine. There's a sense of release for them, especially if they're immune compromised or they have some issue. It's a great sense of relief like that. We have joy from wonder, you know, something astonishing and admirable. You know, I'm reading this big love book, and there's times I'm just like in awe of Lama Yeshe and Rinpoche. I mean, Rinpoche, because I've known Rinpoche for years. I have a personal experience with Rinpoche in person. Lama, I never met, but years of Vajrapani, all the stories I've heard. But this book lends more to that, really. You know, so there's an awe, there's like a wonder that I'm just delighted with, you know, hearing these stories, and it inspires. We also have a joy from ecstasy or bliss, where we're transported for a moment beyond ourselves into some rapturous experience. We certainly know joy like that. We have joy from exaltation. So maybe we accomplished a really, really difficult task, you know, something really daring. We did it, and there's an exaltation. We get joy like that. There's also joy in radiant pride, okay, which is not the puffed up pride that is one of the 6 root delusions, not that pride, but radiant pride is more like when your child gets a special honor and you really feel like, because you're happy for them, but it brings you joy. And elevation, there's a joy with an elevation where you witness an act of kindness, you witness an act of generosity, an act of compassion, and it lifts you up. It lifts you up like that. There's a great joy in gratitude. Great joy and gratitude, as we know. And then there's some additional ones of rejoicing. We get joy from that, which is one of the easiest ways we accumulate positive energy or merit. You know, you hear about somebody did something well, and you're especially a spiritual activity or something virtuous, and you're really happy about that. Then they say you get some of the merit like that. If they have more realizations than you get half their merit, they say. If you have more realizations than they do, you get double the merit. Now, we don't know what realizations they have, but rejoicing is just a really nice way. It's an antidote to depression. It's one of the antidotes to depression, like that. We have also a word, delight, even enchantment, a shining kind of contentment, like that. And then Matthew Ricard goes on with spiritual radiance. He adds another joy, spiritual radiance. It's like a serene joy born from deep well-being and benevolence. I think some of us know what that's about, when you're really feeling in sync in a really positive spiritual way. Yeah. Let me just check in for a moment. How's everybody doing? Any questions coming up? Okay. And feel free, just let me know if there are any questions if I'm in my document. So there's some research done, and this is from the book, the Institute of Neuroscience and Psychology. This is from the University of Glasgow. Okay, it talks about, and there's a lot of different research about joy and depression, and people break it into different categories, but they suggest there's really only 4 fundamental emotions that we experience as humans. I think it's something you can think about. 3 of which are negative emotions: fear, anger, and sadness. If you compartmentalize your mind in a bit, kind of fits in like that. There's fear, anger, sadness, okay? The only positive one is joy or happiness. 4 different ways they've broken up kind of emotions like that. Now, there's a lot of other emotions, but they kind of can fit into different categories. It's interesting, into those 4 categories. So again, there are going to be frustrations in life. This is samsara, as we know. There are going to be frustrations in life. The question is not, how do I escape? The question is, how can I use this as something positive? How can I use this frustration, this challenge, this difficulty, okay, and reframe it into something positive? So I am starting a class tonight for the New York Center. It's 5 weeks at 7. You can find it on my website. That's about Lojong mind training. I'm going to use a special text for that, not the 8 verses, something else, but also how it then can help us get ready for the death experience, to have a peaceful death. So I just mentioned, as far as with frustrations in life, how can I, and this is Rinpoche, one of his big teachings, transforming problems into happiness. Transforming problems into happiness, one of Rinpoche's books. So again, we're going to have these frustrations that keep us from joy. So let's use it. So now, one thing to understand, I find this helpful, when you have stress in your life, and a lot of people have a lot of it now because of COVID, they're out of work, they're struggling financially, on and on. We all know the different stories, or their kids are trying, it's a big thing about the kids in the schools right now. I have a lot of neighbors on the street with school-age kids. I don't know what they do, really. I mean, they're home, the schools are going to open next week in my area, and they're all mixed about, should they send them back, and what do they do? And one of them's living with their old father, living in the house with them, with the kids, and if the kids kids are germ factories, let's face it. I mean, no, I'm not laying a trip on them. I'm just saying it's hard for them to be careful. And if they come and they bring it home, and what's going to happen. And so let's think about stress for a moment, more realistically, rather than being like, I don't want stress in my life. I don't want stress in my life. Stress and opposition, okay, they actually turn out to be exactly what initiates your development as a fetus. Okay, our stem cells, they don't differentiate and become us if there's not enough biological stress to encourage them to do so. That's the science. But let me talk about stress also in opposition. Is, people say, well, why does my mind always think the worst? Like if somebody's late and they don't come home some night, and my mom used to always be like, oh my God, there's an accident, something happened. She'd always think of the worst. Why do we go there instead of thinking maybe they're having a really great time? Okay. But that is a primordial sense of when we were hunter-gatherers. It's in our biology, it's in our cells and our genes on one type of level. Okay. Because we had to be careful about big animals and things killing us and other people and things. So there's a built-in kind of alert. Okay. So just understanding that, when I notice a stressor come up, now I can a little bit more acknowledge, like, oh yeah, that's just kind of a little genetic system. I don't have to overly buy into it and increase it by ruminating in my mind, revisiting more and more about this stressor and how horrible it is, how all these horrible things happen to me. It's only hell. It's simply not like that. That's not accurate. So, but just understanding kind of biologically, scientifically, genetically, these things are in there for a reason that helps us develop, helps us to grow, like that also came from kind of primordial times. So without stress and opposition, complex life like ours would never have developed. We would never have come into being like that. Okay. And then when a painful situation comes up, okay, in the midst of the pain, you can recognize the gentleness of a nurse who's looking after you. You can see the skill of the surgeon. who's going to perform this operation or that thing, you know. But what happens, sometimes the pain is so intense that you don't have the capacity to do that. Okay. Okay. So here it is. Don't feel guilty. Okay. Don't feel guilty. We are working to develop control over our feelings. Emotions often are spontaneous things that arise because we don't have that much control over our mind. So rather also, and notice family dynamics. So let's not make people feel guilty when it's painful. And I noticed, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I mentioned about these feelings in retreat when I would get down on myself, and then that would start ruminating, or if you're lazy or I wasn't doing a certain practice the way I wanted to do it, and then I'd feel guilty. And I realized that's just a pattern from my upbringing, you know, just raised by people that experienced a lot of guilt and then ruminated through that guilt as I was growing up. I'm not blaming them. They were great. I'm not blaming them at all. My parents, my grandmother, not at all. That was what they knew. That was how they thought. That was just a pattern. But so now as I recognize it, I can say like, no, I don't need to stay there. I don't need to stay there. Okay. I can acknowledge that this is painful right now, or I'm not feeling great. But then again, because of the broader perspective, I can step back and realize there's people helping me. There's so many people helping me in retreat in many ways that I didn't even see, but I just knew there were all these people that were helping in many ways. There were people that were so happy that I could do retreat that were, you know, I remember Rinpoche's, one of his attendants, Venerable Holly, who's a dear friend of mine, we were going to make an appointment to talk. She's in California right now, and just have a little chat at some point, like a month or so ago. And then I said to her, oh no, I'm going to do retreat February 1st. I'm starting for a month. And she was so excited. She was so happy. So it just gave me more zest, more joy of like, yeah, I'm, you know, people rooting for you there. If I'm just in myself and my pain, my stress, this always happens to me, I can't see any of that around me. All the people that are trying to help. So again, you know, we are working to control some of these emotions. That's what we're doing. And again, we know that too much self-centered thinking is a source of suffering. A compassionate concern for others' well-being is a source of happiness. So I'm going to stop there for today. And thank you. Thank you. She just put a link of so we're going to continue. I'll be back next week, or feel free if you want to, I'll just in the chat, I'll put my website here, amymiller.com. I also wanted to mention in closing, if you want to sign up, there's a bunch of other classes going on my website you can look at, but I also wanted to mention, a lot of you already know this. Sorry, my commercial break. I am doing another practice to purify. I'm making satsas. So some of you have gotten boxes, and Mary, I was going to say, I now have a new way I'm sending so they're not breaking. But these are images of the Buddha. They come in any color pretty much. It's a purification practice, and I'm actually mailing them to people. So I just ask if people can cover shipping that is under $22. And I just put an assorted box together for you if you're interested. If you know anyone that would be interested, spread the word, because I have about 22,000 more images to make. And as long as I'm making them, they're available. So I've got a lot more to make of 200,000. So I'm coming into the end of the practice. But like, for instance, it's not tiles, but this counts as 20 images. This is Miktrupa, Akshobhya, like that. So let me know. You can contact me via the website and let me know, send me an email and let me know if you're interested, and like that. Okay, any last?
Thank you so much, Venerable Amy.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week. if not sooner. I wish you all the best. And let's dedicate, if there's anything positive that's come from this, let's invest it. And let's work. If you can work this week with perspective and humility, be really helpful. Notice when your mind's headed downhill, you're suddenly not happy. Can you maybe make a note of those two words, put them on the refrigerator, put them on the bathroom mirror, perspective and humility. See how it can play in your week. Does it help with anything? What helps with it? I'd love to hear how it helps, what's going on like that. And let's invest in our being able to wake up joy more and more in ourselves. And from that experience in ourselves, can we start to reorient some of our activities in more beneficial ways if we feel we need to? And from there, can it help speed us along a path to enlightenment so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings? Thank you so much. Lovely to see all of you. Please be well, and I look forward to seeing you next week.